Communication, sharing ideas. We all communicate, or try. But what makes a really great speaker? One of those people who can stand up in front of a group or even one or two people, hold their attention, and make his words stick?
That's what you're going to find out in this video. You'll get to see, discuss, and practice some important basic communication skills.
And you'll learn some valuable tips that will help you now, in college, in business, as well as in your everyday interactions with people.
Ready to get started? Okay then, here we go. When you're speaking to a group, or even a couple of friends, stand in the neutral position. Your arms are hanging comfortably at your sides. Why is this so important? Your hands, your feet, your ears, and your eyes, as well as your mouth, are all communications tools. Standing in this neutral position lets you make the most of them.
Let us show you what we mean. Where you stand in relation to your audience says a lot without words. Imagine that you're talking to a couple of guys in your troupe. You see that they're squinting, which means that they can't fully concentrate on what you say. A smart communicator moves into the shade, or at least to a position where the sun isn't shining directly into the eyes of the audience. If you're talking to a group, you can choose to stand in one spot or move around a little. As you move, your audience will use their eyes to pay attention to where you are. But avoid pacing, which can be distracting. Movement on just key points will do the trick. If you see that you don't really have the attention of the person or people you're talking to, take a step towards them, subtly, to regain their attention.
Your hands are also very powerful communication tools. You can use your hands and arms to emphasize ideas. An open-handed gesture with the palm up will invite participation. For example, this.
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Typically gets a more positive response than
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
gesturing with your palm down conveys a different message entirely. You use this gesture to calm someone who is talking too much or has interrupted another member of your audience in mid-sentence. Holding up a finger, as if to say, "Please wait a minute and we'll get you," also works to help you maintain control of the flow of communication. Remember, you use gestures for emphasis, as punctuation for what you're saying. Don't start flailing your arms around just to move them. That's nothing but a distraction.
When you're not gesturing, keep your arms at your sides, not crossed over your chest, in your pockets, or in the fig leaf position. You'll divert the audience's attention away from your face.
Now that we've covered how to be a great communicator from the neck down, let's move on to the mouth. Always remember to speak clearly and to project. In other words, speak loudly enough that you're sure the person who's sitting farthest from you can still hear you easily. That doesn't mean shout. Just project.
And vary the pitch of your voice. Otherwise, you'll sound flat and monotone and your audience could end up asleep.
What you say is important, but how you say it is equally important. So pay attention to the tone of your voice.
So far, we've covered feet, hands, arms, and mouth. Next up, the eyes. Eye contact is a great way to connect with your audience and hold their attention.
The best way to do this is to lock eyes with one person for about 3 seconds, then another, until you make contact with just about every person in the group. You'll be able to communicate emotion and energy, plus capture your audience's attention in a big way. The eyes, like the ears, can also help you read your audience.
Do they need a bio break? Are they bored? Are they paying attention? Are they hungry? Are they ready to move on to a new topic? What your eyes don't tell you, your ears will. That is, if you're listening.
I shouldn't have to listen. I'm the speaker, remember?
No, my friend. Sharing ideas is a two-way process. Feedback, hearing what someone has to say, is a key part of the communication process.
Let's review what we've talked about so far. That a good communicator uses his feet, hands, arms, mouth, eyes, and ears in the process. Posture is also important. Make sure you stand straight and tall and make eye contact. You will look and feel more confident.
Now that you know how to look like a great communicator, let's find out how to be a great communicator, starting with a little history.
Back more than 3,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher Aristotle created a communications model that is still valid today. Smart guy.
He said that communication has three distinct parts: the sender, the message, and the receiver.
The idea here is that messages flow both ways, from the sender to the receiver, and from the receiver to the sender. What that means is that both parties are responsible for good communication.
Think of it like a football game. The quarterback would be the sender, the football would be the message, and the wide receiver would be the receiver. The quarterback is responsible for throwing the football in a way so the wide receiver can catch it as easily as possible so he can run with it and score. If the quarterback throws the ball too short or too long, the receiver might miss it. If the wide receiver isn't paying attention and doesn't try to position himself to catch the ball will probably end up on the ground. It takes the two of them working together to score.
So as a speaker, how can you send your message so your audience can easily receive it? How can you help your audience understand what you're saying?
You have to package the message effectively so your receiver gets it without a lot of work. Think about how a journalist packages a news story. It's always who, what, where, when, why, and how.
The Boy Scouts of America has two distinct ways for you to communicate a message effectively, too: the teaching edge and the leading edge. The letters E, D, G, and E stand for explain, demonstrate, guide, enable. In short, the best way to package your message when you're teaching someone a new skill. That means you explain how to do the skill, demonstrate to your audience how to complete the skill, guide them as they try to do the skill, and lastly, enable them to do it on their own.
Now, everyone we lead is not going to be at the same level of knowledge, so you adjust your speaking style to match their level.
When someone is clueless about a skill, you start with explaining the skill. When your audience has a general idea but needs to know specifically what the skill or behavior looks like, then demonstrating is the mode to operate in.
Stepping back and letting the person or persons try out the skill for themselves means you limit your communication and coach them through the behavior. That's guiding. Enabling involves taking 2 steps back to allow the learner to hone the skill and own it for himself.
In any of these stages, it's important to get feedback from your audience to make sure that the message you're sending is actually getting through. If you're talking below their ability, you run the risk of insulting, offending, or boring them, and you stop the communication process before it even starts. If you talk above their ability, you are certainly going to frustrate your audience, and then it's even harder to get them back. That brings up a good point. How do you know the message is actually getting through? The answer? Effective listening.
Think of it this way. Communicating well is a matter of respect. Out of respect for the listener, a speaker will make sure he sends the message well.
Out of respect for the speaker, the listeners will make sure they try to pay attention to and understand what's being said. It's a matter of simply following the Scout Law. It's mutual respect.
One of the best ways to make sure your audience is catching on is to ask a volunteer to bounce the last bit of information back to you. Get them started by having them say, "What I understand you to be saying is," then complete the thought in their own words. This isn't a test, it's a feedback mechanism.
And an opportunity for you, as the speaker, to clarify any message that has not been received. Effective listening encourages your audience to repeat the message back to you, rephrase the message, state their understanding of the message, plus ask for more information if they need it.
Effective listening is also a great tool to use in resolving conflict. Remember it this way, EAR, or EAR.
That stands for express what you want and what you're doing to get it. Address why this is working or not working, and resolve, which involves identifying the options for solving the problem. EAR, in combination with good communication skills, will get the job done. Then you can adjust your message to fit the skill level of your audience.
And always make sure that you're paying attention to the body language, both yours and your audience's. Are you gesturing palm up when you want a response? Or are your arms crossed over your chest? Is your audience leaning forward, listening, or are they yawning or fidgeting? If you want to know how your message is being received, body language can tell you as much as words.
So far, we've talked about communication, when it's just you and your audience involved. But sometimes you'll have a slide presentation or other type of visual tool to illustrate your points.
If you're using any kind of tool, you have to rehearse and make sure that you're confident how everything works before the real presentation begins. The last thing you want is to be searching for the advance button while your audience is waiting.
Talk to your audience, not to your slide presentation. Face front and center, make eye contact. And if you want to make sure you're on the right slide, check the computer screen in front of you, not the wall screen behind you.
Also, avoid what we call the whiplash approach. Quickly turning and looking at the screen and then looking back at the audience every time you advance the slide, and then double checking to make sure it's still there. You may still think you're being subtle, but trust us, you're not. Keep facing your audience and connecting with them.
But what if your audience, or the person you're communicating with, is an adult? Should you do something differently?
Actually, the same tools that work well for communicating with your peers also works well for communicating with adults. In fact, they may be even more important.
When you're communicating with an adult, try to avoid those bad habit words, such as like and you know, the little space fillers that can creep into our conversation. They're not only unnecessary, but they sometimes weaken your message.
So I was like on my honor to do my best and do my duty to God and country.
See what I mean?
Whether you're speaking to your scoutmaster about an idea you have to improve the troop, to a teacher, to a parent, or a store manager, this 5-step process will help you communicate well. Start by saying,
Here's the reason I'm asking for some of your time.
this quickly lets the adult know your objective. Then,
Let me share an idea with you.
you've clearly stated that you have a thought to share in a considerate way. You didn't say, we ought to do things differently, or I think we're doing things wrong. Instead, you opened up the discussion.
Then summarize the situation for them in our who, what, when, why, and how context.
And reinforce the benefits.
Here's why this idea helps us achieve our goals.
Then the big finish,
Let's discuss the steps to put this plan into action.
putting the idea into motion.
Right about now, you ought to be feeling pretty confident because you've just learned some of the basic techniques that will ensure you always communicate well. Ready for a little review?
When you're speaking, make sure you stand in the neutral position with your arms at your side and stand up straight.
A good communicator uses his feet, hands, arms, mouth, eyes, and ears.
Gesturing, stepping towards the audience and projecting your voice, making eye contact and listening to your audience's response helps make you a standout speaker.
Remember, effective communication has 3 parts: the sender, the message, and the receiver.
Each part plays an important role. The message has to be packaged well, the sender has to present the message effectively, and the receiver should do his part to take in the message.
When you're using a slide presentation, make sure you rehearse and make eye contact with the audience, not the screen behind you.
Finally, when you're communicating with an adult, use the same techniques we've talked about to communicate your message clearly, but avoid saying like, and those other little fillers. You'll sound more confident and professional.
Oh, and there's another critical part of communicating well, and that's knowing when to stop talking.
With that, we'll say goodbye, and thank you for your attention.